All right, let's jump right in. Today, we are conducting a full forensic analysis of one of the trickiest parts of retirement planning, the still working exception for required minimum distributions. We're going to get into the weeds of the tax code, specifically Section 401A 9C, to uncover all the hidden traps and, of course, the strategies. So here's our game plan. We've got 5 key areas to investigate. We'll start with the rule itself, the basics. Then we'll really dig into what still working actually means in the eyes of the law. From there, it's a deep dive into a massive trap for business owners. Then we'll look at how recent laws have changed the landscape, and we'll wrap it all up with what this means for staying compliant. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, you have to understand the bigger picture here. There's this constant push and pull going on. The government gives us tax breaks to save for retirement, which is great. But they fully expect to get their tax money back from those accounts eventually. RMDs are their collection mechanism, and this still working rule, well, it's one of the very few ways you can legally tell them, not yet. Okay, let's get into the statutory architecture of this thing. The entire RMD system, everything we're about to talk about, it all hinges on one single concept, the required beginning date, or RBD. That's the deadline, the day the clock starts ticking to take your money out. The first thing you have to wrap your head around is just how fast the goalposts have moved here. For decades, the RMD age was locked in at 70 and a half. Then, starting in 2019, the Secure Acts came along and bam, it jumped to 72, then 73, and soon enough, it's going to be 75. It's been a whirlwind of change. And what's so fascinating here is that your RMD age is totally dictated by your specific birth date. It's this tiered system. So if you were born before July 1st, 1949, you're still under that old 70 and a half rule. Born in, say, 1951, your magic number is 73. And for anyone born in 1960 or later, you don't even have to think about this until you hit 75. And here's our first real forensic find. There was a typo, a literal drafting error, in the SEC 2.0 law that created a ton of confusion for people born in 1959. The text was so ambiguous it looked like their age could be 73 or 75. The IRS had to step in and issue guidance to clean it up, confirming it's 73. This is a perfect example of a hidden compliance trap just buried in the text. Okay, this next point is huge, and it's where a ton of people get tripped up. The still working deferral is not some universal hall pass. It only, and I mean only, applies to the 401k plan at the company where you are currently on the payroll. You still have to take RMDs from all your IRAs, and you still have to take them from any old 401ks you left behind at previous jobs. This is exactly why you hear about the reverse rollover strategy. People move money from old plans into their current one to shield more of it from RMDs. All right, moving on. You'd think the phrase retires would be pretty straightforward, right? Well, when you look at the law, it's actually surprisingly vague. This ambiguity creates some pretty significant gray areas that you need to be aware of. So what does still working actually mean? Well, the law doesn't give us a hard and fast definition. There's no minimum number of hours you have to clock in. As long as you have a bona fide employment relationship and you're on the payroll, even in a very part-time or casual role, you generally qualify. The key word there is bona fide. The IRS can and will challenge sham arrangements where you just keep a title in an office but don't do any real work. Now check this out. The exact day you decide to retire has massive tax implications. It's wild. If you retire on December 31st, the law considers you retired for that entire year. That means your first RMD is due by April 1st of the next year, but your second one is due by December 31st of that same year. You get slammed with 2 RMDs in one tax year. A classic income bunching trap. But if you just work 2 more days into January, you completely sidestep that trap. And now we enter the forensic heart of our analysis. This is where we really put on our detective hats. The law has a very strict carve-out for business owners, and as we're about to see, figuring out who's an owner is way more complicated than it looks. So first things first, what are we talking about here? Under Internal Revenue Code Section 416, a 5% owner is an employee who owns more than 5% of the company they work for. Simple as that. If you fall into this category, the still working exception is completely off the table for you. No exceptions. And that little phrase, more than, is absolutely critical. Notice it doesn't say 5% or more. It's strictly more than 5%. So if you own exactly 5.00% of the company, guess what? You are not a 5% owner for this rule. You can still defer your R&Ds. It's a tiny but vital distinction.
And here is the real trap. Your status as a 5% owner gets tested exactly once. Think of it like this. In the year you hit your RMD age, the IRS takes a snapshot. If you own more than 5% in that picture, you are permanently locked in as a 5% owner. RMDs have to start, and they don't stop, even if you sell most of your shares the very next year.
But wait, it gets so much more complex. To figure out that ownership percentage, you can't just look at the shares with your name on them. No, the law, specifically IRC Section 318, forces you to add shares owned by certain family members to your own total. It's a process called Constructive Ownership, which is just a fancy way of saying the IRS assumes you have influence over your family's stock.
Just look at how this works. Ownership flows everywhere. It flows sideways between spouses. It flows downstream from a parent to a child. And most surprisingly, it flows upstream from a child to a parent, and even from a grandchild to a grandparent. This means you could personally own 0 shares in the company, but be treated as a 100% owner because of these rules, knocking you out of the deferral. It's wild.
Okay, let's fast forward into the modern era. The Secure Acts didn't just mess with the RMD ages. They brought in totally new rules and, you guessed it, brand new compliance traps to watch out for.
Now this is a real game changer, especially for Roth money. Starting in 2024, lifetime RMDs from Roth 401k accounts are gone. Poof, they vanished. So for that specific bucket of your savings, this entire forensic analysis we're doing becomes irrelevant. Even a 5% owner doesn't have to worry about RMDs from their Roth 401k while they're alive.
But you know, when Congress changes one rule, they sometimes forget to update another connected one. And that's exactly what happened here. The age for taking money out went up. But what about a related rule for old-school pension plans, defined benefit plans, that requires them to adjust your payout if you delay taking it?
That's right, they never updated it. That rule is still stuck back at the old RMD age of 70 and a half. So now you have this bizarre situation where a plan sponsor has to track 2 completely different ages for the exact same employee. It's a total compliance headache and a perfect example of a legislative disconnect. All right, let's put all these pieces together. We've dissected the law, we've found the traps. What does this all mean in the real world for plan sponsors and advisors who actually have to make this work?
This might be the single most important operational fact to walk away with. Employers do not have to offer this deferral. It's totally optional. The law says they can, not that they must. And a lot of them, just to keep things simple, write their plan documents to say, nope, everybody starts RMDs at their applicable age no matter what. The absolute key is that a plan has to do whatever its own document says it does. So here it is, the final scorecard from our investigation. If you're a standard employee in a 401k, you can defer. Yes. A 5% owner? No, you can't. And what about any IRA? Doesn't matter who you are. An IRA owner can never use the still working exception. This chart lays out the verdict based on your status and your account type. And this really leaves us with one final big picture question, doesn't it? All of this incredible complexity we've just waded through, the drafting mistakes, the bizarre attribution rules, the legislative disconnects, it's all the result of trying to bolt new rules about longer lives onto an old tax collection system. It forces you to ask, is this whole RMD framework built for a world that just doesn't exist anymore?